for, and we'll distribute the link for other organisers and your volunteers if interested. If you do have specific questions or observations, please could you put those in the chat box. If there are specific questions in relation to the different models, please could you add that clearly in the chat box. If it's more of a generic nature, cross-cutting, please could you put that there. My colleague Dave, who's supporting on this, will pick up the questions. So the process for the webinar will be, I will just do a very short introduction, and then we will move to short presentations by each of the case studies. So Nicole from Cambridge, Brian from Shaley. Could everybody remain muted, please? I'm picking up background noise. Please could everybody remain muted? Then we'll have Colin from Cirencester, Meryl from Farnham, Paul from Lover, Chris from Malvern Hills, and then Ken from Transition Brongo. So please, again, could everybody remain muted? So again, just to repeat, any specific questions in the chat box, please. Any questions of a generic nature, please make that clear. What we'll do is there'll be the presentations of the cases, and I'll ask each of the presenters a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the questions in the chat box. So again, please could everybody remain muted? That would be brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much everybody for joining the webinar. As I mentioned, we had something upwards of 90 people signed up for this from various countries. Please could everybody remain muted? That would be great. This is the third or fourth in a series of webinars that we've put together. So the webinar has been brought to you by University for the Creative Arts, various parts of that, and Farnham Repair Cafe. And as many of you know, there's nearly 2,100 repair cafes in Europe, well, globally, sorry. Actually, that's gone up by 2, so that's sort of interesting. 2 repair cafes have actually been set up in the last week or so. I actually saw a decline. So please could everybody remain muted? And what we saw in the UK is over the last year or so, there was around about a doubling of repair cafes from about 60 to 120. But so UK is hasn't been the leader in this. It's been in Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and then latterly France. But UK, interesting, is picking up. And obviously, for the majority of you know, on the session who are from repair cafes, you'll recognise that obviously repair cafes are about repair, but obviously this social dimension is very key. The community dimension, which we're not really able to provide so much under lockdown. And as many of you will recognise, particularly with certain types of products, we have this emotional attachment associated with products, particularly clothing, furniture, but we've seen it with other products as well. Ourselves, we're a collaboration. We're set up as originally as a small organisation, then the first charity in the UK. And, you know, the Repair Cafe collaborates with the university, with the town, and also we work with a local church, although we're not religiously affiliated. And they're an incredibly powerful partner for us. You know, ourselves, we've been running for upwards of 60 sessions and try and document our impacts. And one thing very quickly for those who haven't been on the other sessions and haven't seen it in the e-shops, we've developed a freely available online tool to help measure the CO2 emissions associated with repairs. And anybody is interested in that, please just come back to my colleague Roz or myself and we can direct you to that. So obviously the point of today, you know, since CV-19, you know, impacted on us all, it's left many of us scratching our heads about what we can do and what we might do. And obviously it appears that some repair cafes responded pretty fast to looking at new models, and some it's taking a bit of a slow burn to think about what they might do, and some are still scratching their heads, to do something or not do something. So in effect, what we've seen, even though people haven't necessarily thought of it in this way, is people have looked at new business models, even though the majority of repair cafes are clearly not businesses as such. It's still the same principles. They've thought about, how the repair cafe can create and deliver and capture value associated with repair in different ways from the normal manner of this. And I just thought this might be useful for those who are contemplating looking at something different under lockdown. There are various tools available to help people think through these types of issues. So this is called the Business Model Canvas, and it's just a framework to think about new things. So if you're thinking about a different type of way of delivering your repair advice or actual physical repairs, there are frameworks out there to help you pull that together. Again, could everybody remain muted? I'm picking up a bit of background noise, and if I'm picking it up, so is everybody else. What I'll now do is, basically, we put a call out to our list of repair cafes in the UK, and 7 repair cafes, including ourselves, came back with what they were doing. So now what we're going to have is some presentations from a range of repair cafes around what they've been doing in lockdown. So I'll firstly pass across to Nicole from Cambridge. Perhaps you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello, hi everyone. So I work for Cambridge Carbon Footprint, which is a climate change charity. A little bit of my time is given over to helping promote the circular economy. One of the most popular projects on the circular economy has been the repair cafes. So we have the Cambridgeshire Repair Cafe Network. It's about 25 different repair cafes organised by town councils, green groups, PTAs, a huge range. We're a network in that we share a toolkit between all the groups. We have skill shares. We have a centralised place for advertising repair cafes. So we had loads lined up when lockdown came. People were really disappointed because everyone knows a lot of work goes into it. So we quickly had the idea to, I guess, run something as similar to a real repair cafe as possible. So we used Zoom, and we set up some breakout rooms in Zoom where people could meet repairers. So we had 8 repairers offering clothing repairs, jewellery repairs, electricals, mechanical and software. We advertised them on social media mainly, because obviously a lot of options for publicity were shut down. We offered them weekly, and I think we thought we were going to be inundated. I think we set up 130 tickets, and we were not inundated. So what did we do? Yeah, so the idea was to give one-to-one advice. We initially set it up that people had to pre-register, but in Zoom, which means that you can pre-allocate people to breakout rooms. But we found that was a real faff. And actually, if you get people together on Zoom, you can just allocate them into breakout rooms when everyone's there. So that really wasn't worth it. So the sort of things that people came along with was, the main thing that I think didn't make it as popular as we hoped was we couldn't take any mains electrical items. And that's something that we made the decision about with our insurers and for risk assessment. And obviously about 60% of the stuff that normally comes into Repair Cafe is mains electrical items. So the sort of stuff that people bought in were solar lights, exercise bikes, coffee tables with stains on them, things like that. I'd say that over 5 cafes, we've probably seen less than 20 items, which is hugely disappointing. But everyone who came along to them said they would come again. I think that the great value in it was those repairers that were involved, they got to meet every week, and it was really sociable. It really helped maintain the momentum between the repairers. We got fantastic coverage. We were on BBC radio as kind of a project making a positive difference during lockdown. We appeared in the council magazines, we appeared in the newspapers. So it was a really nice, good news story. It really helped cement the cafes as a sort of core part of the community. Yeah, and I think the main barriers to getting anything, so I think out of probably maybe 20 items that came in, I think we only totally fixed about 4. And I think the main barriers weren't that people couldn't see what the repairer was telling them. It was more that they didn't have the right tools. So it's like getting into laptops, having the right screwdriver and stuff like that. So overall, it's been fantastic. Definitely haven't had the numbers that we'd hoped, but it's been a positive experience.
Great, thanks, Nicole. I mean, as something we recognise in Farnham with our model, and Meryl will talk about that in a bit. So I'll now pass across, and we'll pick up questions. So if you have any direct questions for Nicole, please put them in the chat box, or if it sparks any generic questions, again, please pick them in the chat box, and we'll pick those up after the round. So I'll now pass across to Brian from Chile, and can you unmute yourself okay, Brian?
I think I've just done that with a bit of luck. If you can
Great.
hear me, then it works.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. Good evening, everyone, and it's great to see so many of you, including quite a few familiar names and faces that I've bumped into over the last couple of years. I ended up standing outside our hall where we run Chailey Repair Cafe on the 14th of August and doing something I never thought I'd have to do, which was turning people away, having made the decision 2 days previously that for a whole raft of fairly obvious reasons now, we weren't going to be able to continue operating face-to-face in the hall. Within about 2 weeks, it was quite clear there was still demand for our services, and we started off by offering advice online. That is, people would write to our email address and ask us how something could be fixed. But very quickly, with the help of 14 of our 37 volunteers, we have gone in to drop it on our doorstep repairs. Very simply, someone writes and says that they have an item that requires repairing. I put that out to one of our teams. If it's electrical, to electrics. If it's fabrics, go to the fabrics team, and so forth. One of our volunteers, or more than one of our volunteers, offers to take it on. I then connect up the customer with the volunteer, and the customer agrees to then drop the item on the doorstep or in the conservatory or somewhere that they both consider safe for the item to be repaired. The volunteer then tackles the repair and lets the customer know one way or another whether they've been able to fix it or not. And then they go and pick it up. And when they pick it up, we invite them to make a donation, which I'm pleased to say the majority have done via backs or via cash in an envelope. The advantage of the system, I think, is that first of all, it keeps us in the public eye. We've attracted a huge amount of goodwill. We've had excellent press coverage from local newspapers, magazines, local radio. It generates income, which is perhaps the least important of everything. But the other thing is that, of course, we are still using the same volunteers with the same tools that they would normally bring along to the repair cafe, except they're doing the repairs in the comfort of their own workshop or kitchen table or wherever they do this stuff, as opposed to being in Chailey Village Hall. Our intention is that we are going to reopen in the hall within the next few months, certainly no earlier than September, and we're going to operate the same system, a drop it in the hall system, where we manage people coming into the hall with their repairs. They will go to a table where some of the volunteers are. We will just manage the handover of the item. We won't tackle any repairs there and then, and the volunteers will still take it home and still fix it. The minuses, something that I think Martin tuned into this when I first used this expression, dry cleaner syndrome. You know that dry cleaners have a significant percentage of clothing which is left with them to be dry cleaned and is never ever picked up. And I don't think there's probably a PhD somewhere for someone to do to try and work out why that happens. But the fact is that we've had 1 or 2 people who've dropped off items, some of them quite large, and simply forget to collect it. And I'm pleased to say that once they've been reminded, they have come along and picked the thing up. The other thing is an assumption that we would do a home visit to fix larger appliances, which we very quickly had to knock on the head. We've had people that wanted us to go and fix their fridge freezers, and a gentleman who asked whether we could come and sort out his front door because the hinges weren't right. We're not moving beyond the position that we've always been in since we opened 2 years ago, which is that whatever we repair has to be portable. Lastly, and I think because people have got sewing machines out and the sewing machines have been in use probably much more than they ever have been, that we've been able to actually advise people how to repair problems with their sewing machines using our resident sewing machine expert by just simply talking it through with them. And on one occasion, simply using some photographs that they sent from their phone, which enabled our volunteer to have a look and give them the advice that's necessary. But in the main, it's been the usual stuff that we've taken on, some clothing repairs, electrical stuff, and pretty much the profile of what we've done has been similar. As of today, we have tackled 67 repairs. They're now coming in increasingly at a fairly rapid rate. We're now getting 3 a day on average, and most days we're getting 3 coming in. I think that's it, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, I think what I've realised, just logistically speaking, it may be easier just to ask my direct questions to each presenter after each presentation. So, and maybe I'll pick up Nicole at the end, if that's okay. So it's just, it's going to be the same question for all. Is what's been the toughest issue to tackle with your new model, and what's been your biggest learning?
Who do you want
Brian?
to go first?
To Brian, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The toughest thing is that we have got 37 volunteers, of whom something like 28, 29 are people that actually fix stuff, and some of them appear to have disappeared. I simply am getting nothing back from them at all. I'm sending out monthly newsletters about what we're doing and the various activities that I'm involved with. And I'm only slightly concerned about them. 1 or 2 have been good enough to write to say, it's okay, I'm all right, I just don't want to do this at the moment. Others have got problems relating to the effect of COVID on their families and just don't want to engage. But I have a hard core of, I think, 13, 14 people that would do it. So answer the first question is probably getting everyone on board. What was the second question, Martin?
The biggest learning.
I think the biggest learning was probably halfway through the 3 months. I suddenly realized that I wasn't actually keeping a spreadsheet with all the repairs, and I was keeping it all in my head, which was really stupid. And as the numbers came up, I have the person that lives with me is absolutely brilliant at spreadsheets, and she very quickly put me on the road to righteousness. And I've now got a spreadsheet where I can track everything.
Right, that's great. And again, I can recognise certainly your organiser role. We're a similar thing. There's perhaps, we have a core group in normal times of 20 to 25, and perhaps about 10 have come back being motivated to be engaged, and a number have not. So I don't think you're possibly alone with losing a few in the short term, but I guess that's going to be interesting to hear from others as well. So I'll now pass across to Colin, and if you can unmute yourself, Colin, that would be great.
I hope you can hear me. Hello?
Hello, it's a bit, maybe you get a bit closer to your microphone.
That's okay, is that any better?
It's a bit distorted, but maybe try.
Okay, it's a new microphone and new camera, so hopefully it should work okay. So, Science Esther Repair Cafe, we started off late 2017. It's a small core to start with, and then evolved quite rapidly into about 30 members over the last 3 years. We're based out of Cirencester, which is a Cotswold town, so the catchment area is pretty much around Cirencester, around 12,000, 14,000 people. The core number of repairers is about 8 to 10 of us. So out of the lockdown period, a lot of those individuals who are retired, like myself, of course, decided that it was better to be isolated away from the impact of coronavirus. Our background varied from engineers to IT specialists, systems marketing, you name it, even got somebody from the petrochemical industry. So it's a range of knowledges, and also capable of doing a lot more other things. So our attendance really is monthly. That's how we used to run. At that time, we get between 10 and 25 customers. That, of course, we had to change. The last one we had in mid-March this year, we had about 20 visitors with varying items ranging from vacuum cleaners to pianos to all sorts of sewing machine and even mechanical toys and devices. So the success rate is really around about 65%, which is pretty much the norm and the average. And then, of course, when the lockdown started, we were pretty much isolated, and we started to actually look at different ways of how we could bring it all back together. For certainly some of the volunteers wanted to do more. And the model we decided to look at, we already had a Facebook and a blog running, so it was fairly easy for us to then look at how we could use the Facebook as a means of a booking arrangement online. That customer would then booking the details of really how their item was looking, what kind of faults they had, their contact details, some pretty much everything from their postal address to their mobile phone number, their email addresses, etc. But the point was we wanted to make sure that the contact was made from one-to-one, so the repairer who was keen to take on that item would actually contact the customer on the prior to actually making that contact. Of course, the customer looks at the disclaimer advisors, the statements, the caveats, because obviously over this period of time, not many insurance companies would take on or underwrite most of what we're trying to do. We then identified the relevant expertise in our repair group, and they will contact the customer and discuss the issue, whether it was repairable. If it wasn't and deemed unrepairable, they would advise the customer that way to go. Obviously, the biggest issues was making sure that everything was clean before we actually took it on. So again, part of the dictate to our customers was to thoroughly clean them, sanitize them, either box them or bag them in bags that were new, not reused. The repairer then arrange for the collection of the item. We went down this model rather than actually having customers delivering, because in the Cirencester community there was a COVID response team set up, and that made us pretty much easier because they had about 120 volunteer drivers. They knew Cirencester pretty well. They had their own structure for coping with COVID contacts, and therefore they knew a system in place would work. We go through them, they make contact with the customer, the driver goes out, collects it, and then takes it to one of our repairers. That goes into quarantine. So for 3 to 5 days, we don't touch any item. We follow all the guidance we possibly can, make sure that actually, the repairers are protected much as we possibly can with PPE. And so while they're doing the waiting period, of course, there's a lot of research goes on to looking at the faults and the conditions of some of the items. Once the repairer is happy, he's finished the repair, he'll discuss with the customer what next to do. And if it's completed to their satisfaction, we'll arrange with our COVID community team, the delivery guys, to come and collect it. So from the process from that side, the customers are pretty much familiar with Facebook pages, so logistically there were no real challenges getting the original booking done. And that continues to provide our visibility as a community service. And it also allowed us to actually make sure that a lot of our customers who had known us for a few years did come back to us. Again, a variety of items. The majority of items we've actually repaired are probably bicycles, interestingly enough. We have one dedicated repairer who loves repairing bicycles. The minuses was the quarantine period. We imposed that fairly early on, the 3 to 5 days, depending on the item size, bulk, surface area. We took a lot of look at various researches and really made the decision that stick to 3 days minimum, for the bigger items, 5 days. The other downside for us, of course, was the majority of our volunteer repairers are in the at-risk category. So that left us with a very small 4 to 5 team. But I'm glad to say over the months now it's been running, we've actually improved our completion rate. We're now up to about 22 items, and we're seeing 2 to 4 items per week.
Great, excellent. Just one specific question, and then those 2 general questions. Why do you put the products in quarantine for 3 to 5 days? That seems quite a significant time scale, bearing in mind other general advice, in terms of food coming in, etc., etc. So, where was the source for 3 to 5 days for quarantine?
It actually came from the COVID community response team. They organised themselves with the local hospital. They had, in fact, 2 or 3 doctors on on their side, and obviously contacts with environmental health and various people from the local council. So we took their advice, minimum of 3 days. Now I know over the media's got from 24 hours to 48 hours, some to 5 days. What came apparent was surface area. As long as the item was a reasonable small item, you could actually get away with 48 hours. But because most of the items, we couldn't really define whether it was a big or a small item, generally speaking, it was easy to say, let's start with 3 days. Any bigger items, let's leave it for 5 days. Storage was the biggest problem, because obviously we're asking either the customer to store it, or it goes into the community response team's local hall storage that they set up for various other things as well.
Excellent. So again, what was your biggest challenge in setting it up, and what's your biggest learning?
Well, the early challenge was, in fact, my idea was not to open this up to the public originally, but to actually help our NHS hospital staff. And so, having done all the Facebook stuff, got all the spreadsheets ready, booking forms, etc., actually getting into the hospital hierarchy and figuring out whether this was a good idea or a bad idea for them was the most difficult part. Sadly, that didn't work out for varying reasons. It takes too long to explain that, but let me just say that once we had set up all of this online stuff, the Facebook pages, the booking form, etc., in discussion with my colleague, Bob Irving, we then decided that, well, why don't we just open it up, general public? Mm-hmm. So toughest point was one, getting it off the ground with really the hospital, but as soon as we'd done all that bit, our local volunteers and local public started engaging with us quite quickly.
And your biggest learning?
Tough one. The biggest learning, I think, is make sure you've got enough volunteers of a younger age group that can help you, because you can soon become overwhelmed with quite a lot of people saying, I want this repaired, and then we go through the process, and then we've tried to figure out the best guy that we have available to do the repair. Yeah,
no, I can recognise that from our demographics and from others. Thanks very much for that, and I'm sure there'll be some other questions later on. So I'll now pass across to Meryl, if you're okay to unmute. Hello, Meryl? Hello?
Hello, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Hi everybody, I'm Meryl. I'm one of the trustees of Farnham Repair Cafe. I won't talk about or give the background on it because Martin covered that briefly at the beginning. So what we have been doing is Facebook-based chat, so really just typing, so no talking or Zoom or anything. And what we did to start with was actually went out on our social media channels and asked people what they'd like. And actually the response to that post on Facebook was just people asking us loads of questions. So we thought we'd try doing this chat method. And so we've now run it 3 times. And we just got into a rhythm of doing it on our usual second Saturday of the month when we'd have a physical session. So we have about 8 people online for those couple of hours, and ask people to post their questions, and we give advice as best that we can. We do also get a few questions offline as well. I would say we've had a few technical teething issues with us trying to learn how to do that on Facebook. And because we've set all of our repairers who are participating up as moderators on our page, means everyone's got to learn how that works on Facebook, which has been a bit interesting. And actually, we've been learning about the model as we go. So in the second session, we introduced kind of concept of a virtual front desk, so that, well, I actually kind of allocate questions as they come into different repairers, so we've got a bit more structure. And we're just in the process now of, after the 3rd session, of thinking through how might we do answer more questions outside of the session. So doing them, you know, saying we'll answer them as they come in at whatever time on Facebook, and also looking at how we can do pickups and repairs if the advice isn't working on the page in the session. So we've given advice on about 30 items to date, which I think for some things works quite well, and for other things where it's more difficult can, you know, it's a bit hard to do. I mean, you know, you get photos, but it's still quite difficult for some items to give advice to people. I was just seeing the question coming in from Caroline on are our repairers happy to use Facebook? So we do have some repairers who aren't on Facebook and don't want to be, so actually aren't participating, but we've got a group at the moment who are, so that works okay. And we haven't done tons of advertising at the minute because we wanted to try it and see how it worked. So actually, with that kind of 8 of us, actually we've got plenty of people to manage the questions coming in. I think if it got loads more popular, then eight wouldn't be enough, and we'd be struggling a bit. So I guess those are the key things about in terms of how it's working. I think one of the things that I've noticed, so obviously we don't have the same social interaction with the public as we normally would do, but actually I think the repairers have been able to interact more than they would normally do, because normally on Saturday morning we don't move, or you know, and people are constantly repairing for the 3 hours that we're open, you know, and actually they don't get to, they might chat to people next to them, but not more broadly across the repair group. So I actually think that's one really nice positive of it. Martin, I'm going to answer your questions without you having to ask me them. So I think the things that have been most difficult is actually that it's hard to really, well, it's hard to give advice on some things and actually repair them. So, or get the person themselves to repair them. And I think some people have been frustrated because they don't know. I mean, the person with the item, I mean, don't really know what to do. And as I said, Facebook has been a bit tricksy. So it's taken me about a month to get one of our repairers set up as a moderator, just because, I don't know, just wasn't working for some reason. And it's taken us a bit of learning to get people understanding how it works, how they post as Repair Cafe and not themselves, how we make sure that we don't have the same people replying, more than one person replying to the same question, that kind of stuff. And the thing that I say that one of the things that we've learned actually is to be flexible. So see what works, evolve, try something again, and be willing to change as things go. So those would be my thoughts, Martin, on your question.
Okay, just one other quick thought. Perhaps the issues around the use of WhatsApp, and as an interesting, useful tool, particularly behind the scenes for the repairers, and maybe a comment around what we're able to do, i.e. advice and less repair.
Sorry, do you want me to comment? on the WhatsApp.
Yeah,
group.
I mean, yes.
Yeah, so we've been using WhatsApp groups in the background so that repairers can talk to each other, and well, both for organising, but also so during the session that they can test, check thoughts about what advice to give in the background. So I think that works well, but it does mean for some repairers they've found it a bit tricky with, they've got Facebook open, they might have multiple WhatsApp groups going, and it can get a bit busy. I think we're starting to get the hang of it now, so that's getting a bit better. Sorry, Martin, what was your second thing?
Then it is, I mean, maybe I'll just make the quick comment and just add to it if you want. I mean, what we've realised is that, you know, we're primarily providing advice, and the actual physical repair is obviously more tricky. We did, you know, sort of almost unbeknownst to the organising team, have 3 physical, you know, repairs happen where, you know, the repairers had contacted the customer, and that's something we're thinking about as a sort of hybrid model. But through our model so far, it's been mainly advice and not physical repair as we would do normally. Any further comments, Meryl?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess that was my point on what's difficult. We're not actually providing the service we normally would do,
yeah.
Which has its challenges. Yeah. So no,
yeah.
That was it from me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I'll now pass across to Paul. And I just wondered initially whether Lover was a branding or was a real place, and then I learned it was a real place.
It's a real place. It's called Lover.
Lover. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hi, I'm Paul Bromwich, the secretary and co-founder of the Lover Repair Cafe in Wiltshire. Our repair cafe is situated in a village 8 miles south of Salisbury. We opened on the 5th of March 2019, and we meet every Wednesday morning. We have a core staff of between 8 and 10 helpers. There are also another 21 skilled helpers, or were, who work from home. The average visitor attendance is approximately 14 to 20 per week. We also run a domestic items recycling service operated at £1 per item. September last year, we opened a Friday drop-off and pick-up service to help people who were unable to make it to us on a Wednesday. On the 20th of January this year, we celebrated logging our 500th job. We only charge for materials used, but from donations received, we cover the cost of the hall and equipment and are able to support our local charities. Our users are predominantly retired people. However, as a result of advertising and word of mouth, our outreach now extends up to 10 miles. 688 jobs were logged pre-lockdown, with 55 of what we call BRR, beyond reasonable repair, giving a success rate of 92%. And then coronavirus struck, and we were locked out of our premises and told by the government that we as seniors should now stay at home. The original organisers were extremely disappointed and frustrated at being able to help our locals. So, having studied the government guidelines, a small group agreed to open a drop-off and pick-up service for 2 hours on a Wednesday and Friday mornings. A drop-off and pick-up sign was erected outside a house close to the hall. A large drop-off plastic box was put in full view for out-of-hours users. Publicity went out that the Lover Repair Cafe had morphed and had become the Lover Remote Repair Centre. Locals were thrilled, and especially as so many were also stuck indoors, tidying their homes and finding items in need of repair and refurbishment. It's basically a very simple system. 1, you drop off your item with a short note regarding the problem and provide your contact details. 2, you get a phone call when that repair is done and are asked to pick up the item the following Wednesday or Friday. And 3, advice, socially distanced, is on hand at each session for any help or information required and we undertake small tasks. Helpers are available to chat and answer questions. Between us, we cover furniture, woodwork repairs, clockwork and mechanical repairs, electrical and electronic repairs, with a great manageress to monitor the regulation compliance and log in the jobs. Some of our shut-in colleagues are only too happy to receive farmed out jobs like ceramics, lathe work, upholstery, specialist weaving, etc. Our present operators consist of 4 main session helpers, plus 2 new helpers as a result of seeing us in action are prepared to come and share the sessions if needed. We have 5 skilled helpers working from home. People are keen to express their gratitude and often ask where donations went. It quickly became clear that they liked the idea of supporting the National Health Service staff. So after contacting Salisbury Hospital and getting insurance that any gift they had would go towards all their staff, especially those working in the coronavirus care, we made that our target. To date, we've given the National Health Service £1,000, with another £5,000 due to go to them this week. We are overwhelmed with people's generosity. Some people even donate items for us to check out and sell on behalf of the National Health Service. Some items for you as a result of the lockdown. In the 15 weeks of lockdown, remote repair has registered exactly 300 jobs. Of these, 19 have been BRR, a success rate of 93%. We have lost count of how many garden shears and secateurs we sharpened.
Yes, I'm
11 sewing machines have been repaired. Many are being used to help make PPE masks, etc. The most common item received is upright vacuum cleaners. There's a groan every time these come in now. To finish on the fun side, we are pleased to report we have copied the BBC TV repair shop by refurbishing a skeleton clock, including sourcing a glass dome, and also refurbishing a cast iron clock with tortoise bell. And very finally, the funniest job received, we were asked to turn a beautiful hardwood dog's funeral casket into a biscuit basket for the client's next pet. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Paul, and that's quite a remarkable transformation in a short time there. So congratulations to you and your team there. So again, the same questions. What's been your biggest challenge, you know, and then secondly, what's been your biggest learning?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, is missing the coffee and the cups of tea and the chat. The actual setting up was surprisingly easy. And the other big downside is the fact we've probably lost, for the time being, 10 to 15 of our helpers. That's on the downside. The biggest learning curve is just how grateful and generous people have been, especially once we'd said that we're going to support the National Health Service. That was really quite remarkable.
Excellent. And sorry to ask a rather direct question. By lost, do you mean, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, we didn't. No, nothing like that. No, sorry. Okay. Some of those that were at greatest risk, okay, haven't been involved at all. And yet, 1 or 2 of them, I know. I'm thinking one man in particular who is locked away, but is very happy to receive a bit of work left on his doorstep, and he'll phone us back in a couple of weeks' time saying it's done. Sure.
So it's interesting there. You know, linked to Brian's experience and our experience.
Yeah,
we've just had some of our repairers who really, you know, haven't engaged, and there'll be multiple reasons why.
Yeah.
So that's a learning perhaps for all of us. If not everybody, you know, responds, it's not just you. so excellent. Thank you very much, and I'm sure there'll be some more questions. So just moving into the last couple, you know, before the questions from the chat, is over to Chris from Malvern Hills.
Hello, good evening. I'm not going to repeat the information that's on the slide. But Malvern Hills Repair Cafe has been operating since December 2012, that is on the slide, and we are the hub or the headquarters for 2 local networks, Repair Cafe Herefordshire and Worcestershire, and lately Repair Cafe West Midlands. And now we, in our project, was advised by Repair Cafe Ledbury, which is part of our network, which tried to do a virtual repair cafe, Zoom or Skype or something, and drew a complete blank. And I think it's probably to do with the demographic of this part of the Malvern Hills district, which is very, very pensioner. 27% of the population are over 60. So we went for this part of the business of having been up for nearly 8 years is that we have quite a large client or customer email contact list, some 1,200. So once we decided that we were going to run this scheme, and we had 6 repairers, a triager, a sharpener, and a volunteer transporter. Once we had done the planning and put that all in place, we went out to our email contact list, and the response was immediate. And so we, just to sort of do the numbers, we've done something like 85 successful repairs, and we've sharpened over 100 instruments. I'm just going to put you to the salient points of our project, and it is entirely voluntary participation for repairers, assistant volunteers, drivers, and so on. We had a dedicated triage service to limit expectations and unnecessary journeys. That was important at the beginning. And the triage service was done entirely by telephone. And the chap we had doing it was a very experienced and very competent repairer, multi-skilled, did a fantastic job in ringing the customer, triaging it, and then advising whether it was advising self-repair or moving it on to be transported to a repairer. We did postcode matching of customer and repairer, which reduced vehicle movement, journey times, and so on, important in the early days. We had a clear and comprehensive set of guidelines for both repairers and customers. Quarantine and sanitization measures or decisions were left entirely to repairer discretion. Repairers received full reimbursement for any PPE sanitization equipment purchased. We informed the local police and council of the project, and that gave it a sort of semi-official status, i.e., our paperwork was accepted as grounds for travel, which once again was important in the early stages of lockdown. We put no time pressures on repairers, and customers were made aware that they couldn't expect any particular turnaround time. That would very much depend on the repairer's quarantine requirements and the time he had to effect. And thankfully, our insurers agreed to extend our existing public liability insurance to cover all the project activities. I would say the limitations of our project model is that it's only open to repairers with space, or workshops at home. We did do some, we had some issues with electronic paperwork because we were keen to have that disclaimer in place, that if anything went wrong, we were covered. So that we've refined that now, and we've eliminated that. And we think that our model is very much suited to small town, a potted town like Malvern, I think also like Bewdley. I see John's here, and the bigger town. We tried to disseminate the whole thing across the network in a sort of keep repair alive program. Because we were concerned that the more people just thought, oh, it's broken, I'll go online and buy another one, that the whole repair ethic or repair culture would get lost. The responses we've had is from the smaller towns. They've come on board, but finally we've now got We've now got Worcester getting involved, you know, a small city. So our model is being adopted and spread across the network, albeit slowly. Our major learning experience, I feel, is that the importance of keeping a really rigorous contact email list. But, you know, Facebook is fine, and you know, but you really, you know, you're not approaching your customers absolutely directly. The email in saying we can repair your items if you've got something seems to move it. What was the other question?
This one generic one and one specific is what is your was your biggest challenge? And obviously for you, you're operating on a slightly larger scale, like with Cambridge, with your broader network. So,
yeah,
you know, what was your biggest challenge? I guess the other one.
I'm going to be brutally honest here. I mean, we went through quite a consultation process. You know, I mean, we just had the idea that we needed to do something to keep repair alive in lockdown, and we did quite an internal consultation process. And I'm going to be honest, is that we struggled to get some of our people just on board to buy in. You know, they were very, you know, COVID-19 afeared. You know, there's going to be a second wave. It's irresponsible behaviour to start trying to do all this sort of thing. And so that was it. And I think we may well have lost those folk when we go back to a fixed or static venue. They may not come back because I don't know. You know,
so I can recognise that risk. Concern, you know, going forward. But my specific sort of last question is good old insurance. So did they ask you any specific questions related to COVID? Or
no. I mean, we're extremely lucky in that. You know, through you know, Jan publishes this manual and so on and so forth, and so through that we've disseminated. You know, we put a lot of insurance business to our broker, JST Insurance Services of Barnsley. I'll give them a little plug here, and they very kindly. May was actually our policy renewal time. And they very kindly came back saying, appreciate that the Repair Cafe world is not what it was this time last year. We're prepared to give you free insurance, or, you know, arrange for your insurance to be free until such time as you get back to the fixed venue, that sort of thing. And so we said, well, you know, that's great, thank you. Could you ask the insurers if they would cover this project idea that we have? And they came back within an hour saying, yes, they have absolutely no problem and they wish you every luck with it. So, yeah, so I think the whole thing about Repair Cafe insurance is at last kind of shifting. I think the underwriters are beginning to realise that it's quite a low risk.
I think, as you intimate, from the early days, you know, the discussion. I remember in the early days, 2 telephone conversations for them to even understand what a Repair Cafe was. So I think the world is moving on. So great. Thank you very much, Chris. And I'm sure there'll be some other questions coming from the chat. So last but no means least, we have Ken from Wilmslow.
Good evening, everyone. Our Repair Cafe is based in Wilmslow in Cheshire and is run by Transition Wilmslow, which is a grassroots community group with the aim of building a more sustainable Wilmslow. We have held 2 cafes so far in local church halls. Our first was in October last year and our second was in January. We had planned to have 3 more this year, April, June and October, but due to the virus, we decided for safety reasons to cancel these. We're fortunate to have 25 skilled repairers, ranging from electrical, woodwork, bicycles, textiles, jewellery, computer advice and general repairs. We also offer teas, coffees, and cake, lots of cake. We're funded by donations from our customers. During lockdown, however, we invited our repairers to send in photos before and after current and recent repairs. And once we've got these photos, we then upload them to our social media, Transition Wilmslow social media platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website. That's really all I've got to say about it. We just do, our toughest thing so far is that because most of our repairers are still working, we're finding it can be difficult to get enough of their time to be able to do repairs.
Okay.
And also, our biggest learning so far is to be as patient as we can, and also to keep thinking positively.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You've not been trying to take forward any sort of new model as such under lockdown, but you've been using it as a time to sort of share information between your repairers.
That's right. What we're trying to do, Martin, is to have our customers, our interested parties, can view before and after repairs, and also have a short description of how the repairs were completed. They can view them online, and hopefully they'll learn how to make a repair, and perhaps and hopefully be able to attempt a repair by themselves.
Okay, so that were those were repairs done prior to lockdown?
Not necessarily. They could be repairs which are happening just now.
Okay.
Or prior to lockdown. Doesn't have to be before lockdown.
Okay, great. So again, same question to yourself: is what has been the biggest challenge, and what has been the biggest learning in the context of, say, the last 15 weeks under lockdown? How's it impacted you guys, and what's been the biggest problem and the biggest learning?
One of the biggest problems I've had, or one of the biggest impacts I've had, is that we don't have face-to-face contact with our customers. So the idea was that when we have the customers come into the repair cafe, rather than watching us repair this, or repairers repair the stuff, they get an opportunity to repair the items themselves. And if they need advice, then the skilled repairers give them that advice to help them repair it.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. So great. Well, thank you very much. And I don't know if, Nicole, you're still there. You maybe perhaps had to go. I'm not sure. Are you still online, Nicole?
Yeah, so the toughest was definitely getting people to feel confident enough to come along to the Zoom repair rooms. So loads of people said, fantastic idea, love it, but didn't actually come along. And I think the strongest thing, the learning, was that people really learned a lot coming along to a virtual repair room, more than they actually learned at a repair cafe. Because we were having to take them through it. We were having to say, well, try this, try that, reach for this tool. What do you think? We weren't able to actually do it for them. So all of the repairers felt the learning was stronger. And as a result, we've decided to try, when we open up again, instead of having people sitting face to face across tables, we're going to sit the repairee and the repairer next to each other, so they actually get a better view of the repair. And we're also sometimes going to try to let repairees do the first 5 minutes of each repair, just to start it themselves and see what happens. That was our learning.
Okay, excellent. So, some of the things just that are coming to mind in terms of at least starting to look towards coming out of lockdown is something that, literally this week, there are issues with the venues. So it's not just what you do during your time, but what is the position of your venue. So I learned today, literally today, probably 2 hours ago, for us, we were planned to be moving to a larger space, but you know, even when we feel able, you know, to go back and start again, which is not clear and has not been decided by our trustees, is they could only fit 15 people in the room at the moment, according to, if they follow the guidance in terms of social distances. That's no good for us, because we can have 20 to 25 repairers and have had up to 110 customers through the door. So there are a range of constraints, and not just the obvious ones that are starting to become aware. You know, so for us, you know, like everybody else, we're looking forward to getting back face to face with people, because again, one cannot underestimate that social value that the repair cafes deliver, apart from the physical repairs leading to, you know, landfill reduction, CO2 reduction. So I'll pass across to Dave now to pass across any specific questions, maybe to start off with, to the different presenters, and then perhaps some generic questions.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Dave Smith here from File and Repair Cafe. I've written so much down. I tried to summarise it and still ended up with 30 points. So to give you all the value out of this, I'll read them quite quickly, and maybe, Martin, if you want to pick up any that you don't think we've already addressed. I think it's interesting that how fond we've grown of the face-to-face sessions, and in fact, although we've made the best of it, there isn't any substitute for that face-to-face contact. But even so, we've actually come up with some new ways of doing things which actually might be fed back into the face-to-face. People have had various issues with the technology. Some have made it work better than others, but Zoom has probably been a major plank of our strategy. And in fact, in some respects, people saying they've learned more from those sessions. WhatsApp has got quite a few thumbs up. And in fact, the Zoom chat, which I've been following as well, is a very rich route for information exchange between you guys and us, but also between yourselves. It's very reassuring to see people answering each other. I'm really pleased about that. Pat, portable appliance tests have come up quite liberally as usual, and people concerned about whether they should or shouldn't be doing it.
Perhaps if you can focus on the screen, Dave, you're drifting a bit there.
Okay. The data protection has come up as usual. People supplying their data. We've lost repairers because a number of them are older and maybe actually have safeguarding or responsibilities for people. So we've actually lost a few of the repairers. A lot of discussion about PPE and what sort of protective equipment people should be using in the new regime. Sharpening came out quite strongly as arguably not so much a repair, but a maintenance effort. But a lot of people obviously out pruning their hedges. The social aspect is still fairly high on everybody's agenda, and even though we're working remotely, people are valuing the exchange of views and information across things like WhatsApp and even Facebook and emails. Interesting to hear that people have actually targeted the NHS as a group to help specifically, which is really nice to hear. And one particular thing which came up was postcode matching, so that we can actually optimize any journeys that people do traveling from their home to pick up something. The drop off and collect model, as it's being called more frequently now, is certainly something a lot of people are trying, some with more success than others. And maybe that's partly to do with the local circumstances. If you're in a village or a city, maybe that does or doesn't work so well. And frankly, there's a whole lot of coronavirus fear, which actually may be deterring people from getting involved. but who's surprised about that? We've all experienced, me included, the difficulty of us helping people to repair things. when in fact, normally, particularly for an electrical item, if you don't have the right screwdriver, the tools and so on, it's very difficult to do something. So that's been frustrating for customers and repairers alike. Interesting that quarantining items and disinfecting them came up. That's obviously quite a valid way of adding to the protection and reducing some of the risk. Venue, excuse me, venues is another issue, as Martin was just saying, so I won't dwell on that one. So I think that's probably my best summary of the key issues that came up, either in the discussions or on the chat itself.
Were there any, I mean, I just one point of clarification, and then perhaps if any specific questions came out from that, Dave, that you might pose to the speakers, just while you're perhaps thinking about that. Just a point of clarification. We at Fire and Repair Cafe have really just been focusing at present on the Facebook model. We've separately then looked at this using Zoom to just share lessons, you know, primarily targeted more at the startup repair cafes. So we recognise that we've obviously learned some lessons in running 58 sessions, and there are others who have done a lot more than us. We've recognised that learnings have been made across the product areas, and we just felt to act as a catalyst to share that. And we found, you know, and this event, and we found a lot of interest from other repair cafes in that. And perhaps for some, you know, in a sense, there's a cycle of some very mature and advanced repair cafes, some who are in the early stages, and some who have been thinking about setting up a repair cafe. So that was more, you know, we were providing, sharing, you know, knowledge, particularly to those new startups, because as many of us would know from looking at the Repair Cafe Foundation website, you know, fairly regularly, there was a substantial growth over the last, you know, year or so, and particularly in the UK, a doubling in the UK. And what I've observed from the conference we organised and also the talks is that there's now these regional models that started with people like Chris and Malvern Hills going across the counties and into Cambridge, but also in Devon. So we've got these broader networks emerging apart from the individual networks. And again, you know, as Dave mentioned here, you've got, you know, different issues associated with small, tight communities. Maybe people can walk the repair there, you know, compared to a city, more difficult. But I also know from the broader repair cafe movement in places like Ghent and Belgium and Amsterdam and Berlin, they might have 25 repair cafes or 30 repair cafes in different parts of the city. So there is this proximity issue there. So I don't know if that's given you, my tap dancing there, Dave, has given you some time to come up with a couple of questions.
Not so much questions, but insurance is a regular topic in all of these webinars, and it looks like there is some movement in that some of the companies that people have found are actually more amenable to covering repair cafes, including work at home. But I have to reflect the number of comments in the chat. It's almost probably 20%.
So we've got more, we seem to have more general type questions emerging, and maybe we can pick up any comments on repairs. Certainly what I saw for the first time at our conference is two insurance salesmen booking in to the Repair Cafe conference and being very, you know, insurance salesman type of style, trying to get hold of leads beforehand. So very much a commercial insurance players moving into the market. So I don't know if others have any comments on insurance. So, you know, maybe
the comments where, I mean, quite a few people have found their insurance companies have been quite amenable. But sorry, I was just about to say there's one other comment that comes up so frequently, and that's whether or not to do PAT checks on items who should do it, what equipment should be used, whether it's necessary, how you should do it, and so on. There's always a whole load of questions on that.
Maybe just again, if you could think of a question from that, Dave, just another quick comment is, I mean, what is noted is, and I found it quite surprising actually at the conference, is a number of repair cafes do not take insurance, and they have a very clear reason why they don't take insurance. But you know, I'm quite surprised at that. Certainly, for some of us, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen, you know, a change in mindsets, and obviously the market has moved in a sense from people really not knowing what you're talking about when they ask you about insurance, to now salespeople trying to sell specific, you know, insurance products for repair cafes. And perhaps, I mean, Chris and maybe Nicole, as you know, being around longer than us, do you have any comments? You know, are you do you see, you know, the insurance, you know, side improving?
No, the advice we always give everybody who asks us about insurance is try and spread it across a group, across you know, across your network. I mean, for instance, am I talking over somebody?
No, I think somebody's talking over you. So please go ahead.
No, the point is that, you know, for the guys in repair.
Sorry, can somebody keep muted, please?
You know, for the folk in well, the folk in both our networks now, if they take you know, an annual arrangement with us, they're paying for their public liability. They're paying £12 a session for their public liability and employer liability insurance. If they just want to do it on a casual basis, it's £15 a session. Our brokers are fully aware of what we're doing, and you know, in terms of, once again, our brokers are on our side. They're trying to get the insurers and underwriters to understand what a low risk venture repair cafes are. But until we get to that point, I say quite simply, for a single repair cafe to operate its own standalone public liability insurance is prohibitively expensive. You have to share the deal somehow or another, you know.
Well, we've actually, that's where we started. You know, we found, including your broker and others in the early days, these huge figures. But we've actually found a number of quite reasonable, much more reasonable, you know, policies that exist now. You know, talking about a couple of £100 rather than 500. So we've certainly found that change a little bit in terms of price. Obviously, we're one rather than multiple. But I don't know if you have any comments as well, Nicole.
No, it's just we're looking to get coverage to cover all the repair cafes in the network, and so we've asked Wales Network. They have something with Hiscox that sounds very cheap. I think it's based on a proportion of the donations or something that they take, or it's very, very low. So yeah, we're inquiring with them. I can share. Yep. Chris?
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, no, be very wary of that. We went down the Repair Cafe Wales network, and thankfully a few people in our network questioned it. The problem with the Repair Cafe Wales insurance is that you lose all individual autonomy of the various repair cafes in the network. You all have to be subdivisions. In the case of Repair Cafe Wales, you know, nominally you don't have your own set of governors, you don't operate your own governance. You all operate according to the governance procedures of Repair Cafe Wales. It was always a little bit iffy. I mean, I forget the name of, I think they were somewhere down in Cornwall, where they're brokers before Hiscox, but they're Cornwall, I think they're called Mid Cornwall brokers, but they dropped them because they didn't believe that all these repair cafes in Wales could be floundering around without any of their own governance, any of their own, boards of directors or anything. So in other words, you just have to be a little bit wary that if you follow that Repair Cafe Wales network, your individual repair cafes become sort of like automatons, really, controlled from centre.
We ourselves, we've found, I mean, again, we're at an individual rather than multiples, but I can recognise what you're saying. Is just two quick comments. I mean, in some places like the Netherlands, it seems like the Netherlands Repair Cafe Network have negotiated these this block policy for repair cafes that fit within their system. For our side, we came across Zurich, and Zurich we came across because we basically piggybacked on the town council's insurance when we were transitioning towards the charity. And so we only came across it by happenstance, but we found a very good premium. As you said, Chris, somebody said they've given us like a 2-month vacation, so we found them very good with a very, decent premium. So perhaps we could just go back to Dave again, if there's any questions or observations that would be useful for the presenters to tackle.
Yeah, I'd go back to the PAT checks, and people are asking whether you need to do a PAT check, whether you should do it before repair, after repair, how you do it, who should be expected to do it. That's really the nub of it.
So yeah, so we're getting sort of general repair cafe questions rather than repair cafes in lockdown questions. So it's maybe I can ask a question, and if any can think about how they're tackling the PATs themselves, but maybe I can also say, are there others that have not presented today that are running some sort of lockdown model? If you could perhaps, put that in the chat box, and Dave could pick that up as well, could be interesting.
Well, the lockdown aspect is that normally if you visit a repair cafe, then there's somebody with an electrical qualification who's able to do the PAT check, whereas if you're using a drop off and collect model, it's more difficult to make sure that a proper PAT check is done. So I guess that's where the lockdown aspect comes.
And just before I come back to you, Chris, I see your hand up there, is that in terms of our transitionary thinking, which is very early about physical, or some hybrid model, that's absolutely something that I've thought about, whether we actually tackle any EEE, or unless we have one of our repairers who holds our PAT testing equipment becomes the house for the testing. So absolutely, I recognise that point. Now, Chris, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to see one thing taken away from, by all, yourselves and all the participants of this webinar, is that I think it's really, really important right now to keep the repair ethic, the repair culture alive in communities. It has got quite a lot of traction. I mean, since we started back in 2012, more and more repair cafes have come online. The repair shops come on telly, and all this sort of, so repair is there. But then come March, April this year, it just became very easy to say, oh, it's broken, I'll get onto Argos and they'll deliver it and blah, 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 just go online and buy it. And this is going to be not only within the repair cafe world, in the whole series of other different sectors. you know, there's the ease now of just going online and buying a replacement could have a really detrimental impact on repair cafes and the repair culture and what they're trying to do. I think whatever you know we take away from here, if you go back to your communities and just keep stressing that
I think there's a couple of
the repair ethic is alive. You know,
a couple of quick responses to that. I think, you know, one of the things that could be happening, as was mentioned by others, is there may be some level of self-repair happening, because as we know, with videos etc coming on board, a lot of people are, you know, using videos. They may not be that good, but they can see what they need to do. So and on a higher policy level, you know, within the Circular Economy Action Plan within the European Commission, now what is wedded into that is the right to repair. Now whether UK follows that in you know, I have to be careful about the way I say Brexit, but, you know, will the UK follow that embeddedness in policy that we're seeing from the Commission within circular economy? Because in the longer term, you know, it's clear it's only going one way, at least within Brussels. UK, you know, government is less clear on this, and therefore I totally reinforce what Chris says to keep this going. But again, as somebody who's been involved in sustainability on global, local business, charity, you know, repair cafes are on a, you know, an open door. People love them. So I think it's the community element as well as the repair. So, you know, but we are facing this short-term blip, you know, which could be quite significant. Any other points there, Dave?
Yeah, if we're sticking to the COVID aspect, then people were debating as to what quarantine measures were necessary, particularly on the drop-off and collect and drop-off model.
Yeah, I don't know if any of those that are operating the drop-off model have any further comments. I remember, was it Colin was saying they had 3 to 5 days, and I wonder if that advice is changing. You know, is that advice you were using, if you're still on, Colin? I think it was who mentioned.
Yes, I'm still here.
That was your policy at the beginning, and whether you've revisited that as you know, I'm not quite clear to say knowledge or clear government advice is the right word, but as at least information has gone out there, are you changing your position on the 3 to 5 days?
At this time, no, because like all of these scientific advisory groups, we went back to the COVID community response team and asked them if they were changing their plans, because we're still using that transport process. They're our transporters, basically. And they were adamant they still wanted to make sure that it was a 3-day minimum. They've looked at other advisory groups, they've gone to the government advisory groups, they've gone through medical advisors, and the culture's still the same. The virus is still out there. So, yeah, it's a bit tedious, but once you explain to the customers about what we're doing and why we're doing it, that becomes a non-issue.
So just a very practical question is, I can't remember if you said it. Do the repairer would put it in their garage or whatever for 3 days, or which way round is it, if you know what I mean?
It really depends on once our repairers had a conversation with the customer. If through that conversation our normal reaction is with the customer, will they clean it down and will they isolate it for 3 days? If they're not happy to do that, or they find a reason not to do it, we will then advise them to obviously clean it, box it. We have then our COVID response team who go and collect it. Now we have a choice. They have a pretty big storage facility. They put things into quarantine all the time. So we can either ask them to do it, or if they're happy to, they'll take it to our repairer, and then the repairer through our policy and processes will be compelled to put that into 3 days. So there's various choices depending on how the customer wants to work, but more importantly, we're still following our COVID response team's directive.
Yeah, I mean, I can see also on this, there's again this personal perception of risk, and the issues about, you know, individuals wiping stuff down, you know, all the kits associated with it. So
yeah, one of my colleagues decided to go out and buy himself almost a hazmat suit. It was quite impressive.
Yeah. Any other comments from any of the other presenters, or indeed any of the other people on the call who've had to deal with this issue? But I mean, maybe a quick follow-up on that, Colin, is once things were clearly explained and why you requested that, was there, you know, a pretty good acceptance of that, you know, approach?
Very much so. In fact, some customers even went to the point of asking us what we would recommend cleaning it down with.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was, again, once you explain it, and then most people have seen TV reports, radio news, all the rest of it, they're all pretty much keen that they do not infect somebody else by passing their item onto one of our repairers or even one of the transport guys.
Yeah, understood.
Martin, one other one was data protection. Obviously, that comes up normally anyway, but in lockdown, more people need to get customer repairers, phone number, home address, and so on. And some people are concerned that that was potentially infringing data protection, but also are concerned that repairers' home addresses would be circulated with maybe unintended consequences.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess a fair point, and you know, we ourselves, because I've had to do it for 2 other initiatives, have a GDPR process. But you know, I again, yeah, the change in the model, where you actually know where people live, in effect, their postcodes, you can identify people specifically, you know, in a sense. Yeah, that's. Has anybody thought through this issue in this context? Doesn't sound like it.
Martin, it's Colin.
Yeah.
Again, just on that point, because in effect we're using a front organisation that's doing the collection from the customer and the transportation. Generally speaking, most of our repairers do not share their home address or where their location is with the customer. Yes, the customer shares it with us on our booking form, but then they have to read our disclaimer, and we obviously comply with GDPR and say that we're not going to use this for any other purpose than what we're required to use it for in the first place.
No, that's, yeah. I mean, yeah, I can see that some amendments to forms may be required with the click and drop off model. Because yeah, no, I can see that. So sorry, can you just repeat that again? So let's get to the end of the day. Is that you're so? Could you just repeat that again in terms of the customer / repairer responsibility? That's my wife laughing in the background there about my.
Right.
So could you just go over that again now, because I think it's quite an important point.
Okay, so from our original review of what we were trying to set up, obviously using the third-party COVID response team as our transporter, even though the customer's using our booking form to put their contact details in, they can still decide whether they want to give us a home address, a postal code, or often is the case, a mobile phone number.
Yeah.
We will then either have our repairer contact the customer, whichever route is easy, email, mobile phone.
Yeah.
Once they agree that the repair is possible, that repairer will get in contact with our community response team who transport the device around. We give them either the customer's contact number that we have, but obviously they then will have the customer's details of where they're located. Because that community response team does comply with all the GDPR regulations, they complied with it pretty much because they work with the local council and other authorities. They already have a highly structured GDPR set of processes. And so their transporter really is the only person who knows, one, the end user's customer location, full booking and address details, and the repairer contact details.
Yeah. So in that instance, so we would, for example, have, the customer name, the phone number, etc., on one of our, data collection forms, but in your instance, you don't share the repairer's, details other than the phone number. But also in your instance, you've got 3 parties involved. And it's really only the third party that knows both parties, where both live in effect. And I guess that they're quite heavily, in that sense, regulated, I guess, with probably quite strict, adherence to things like GDPR.
Yeah, and I agree with some of the other colleagues that have, adopted the route where customers take it to the repairer's home. That's all well and good until the customer decides that they're not going to through, a process or the procedure that's set up and then bypass everything, and we don't get contact with our repairers unless it's absolutely necessary. And then we find out they're doing individual repairs because they know a friend of a friend of a friend, etc. Yeah.
No, I think that this is an area that I this is actually a key point. So, do we have any final points, Dave, that that perhaps cropped up that's worth passing across to people, because time, I guess, is getting on for all?
I think one way or the other we've probably tackled almost everything. So, apologies for my phone rang and disrupted the audio, but I think one way or the other you've tackled almost everything.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Martin, I have a quick
go
question.
ahead. Yep.
Yeah, where a lot of our volunteers, including myself, are elderly.
Yeah.
The question is how, either with the drop-off model or if and when we go back to in-person, how do we encourage them to continue where they're the high-risk group? I think we have to obviously tell them there are these risks, but we also want to encourage them to stay involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And just summarizing at least what our experience and then what I've picked up, for others to comment on, is again, for our volunteers, we've probably got 50-50 from retired and in risk groups, and then 50% who aren't. And also that's the same for customers as well. The customers are also in that, a lot are in the risk group as well. So that's another issue as well. So, and again, what I've noted is that particularly as we've gone at the present down the online Facebook model, you've got a number of our older repairers have just not engaged in that Facebook model at all. They haven't really also, engaged maybe necessarily in the WhatsApp group either, because, different issues with different age groups. So, but I also noted it's that some of even the younger groups, actually, those in the 50s have actually dropped off the sort of communications, where we'd have a very consistent group of 20 to 25 that turn up every session. Since we went into lockdown, literally a proportion of those are not responding to anything at all. So, I don't know, well, I don't want to speculate on why, but, that's the reality. And I also heard that from others as well. So, I guess, again, playing a bit the long game in here, why is it that people of older generations are engaging in repair cafes. Generally, from our research, general research we've done on, global research, and our experience is people want to give something back. They want to, they've got time and they want to do something positive for the community. So that's a motivation amongst particularly the older groups of people, and that will still be there. And I think, when people come back, how we manage the transition is the tricky issue. I don't have a problem in the medium term once we get over, things, but managing the transition is going to be a problem, because I also unfortunately started to skim government advice on shops and restaurants as the nearest models to repair cafes. And I think, one of the recommendations in one of them is that people should not sit face to face. So there are issues there. They were suggesting people should sit back to back in certain instances. So there's going to be, so I don't have any concerns in the longer term, but I don't have an easy answer to your question, Ray, in the short term. Am I right? Are you from the US?
Yes, yeah, I'm from Massachusetts. We've been doing repair cafes since 2013.
Right. So you're one of the leaders, like with the Palo Alto guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've
So
helped a bunch get started in Massachusetts as well. Yep.
So what is, do you have clear, it's a fairly dangerous question to ask. Do you have clear guidance from the state level or the federal level, around equivalents of repair cafes, so shops or restaurants, that you could apply in your context? Or how are you thinking about it from your side?
Yeah, I think we so far we're still just kind of contemplating, but we would fit into the model of shops.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing we have to investigate, whether what do we need in terms of disinfectant. And one of the other things a lot of shops now here have are these plastic shields, clear plastic shields where the cashiers are, just to protect them and to protect the customers. So we're probably going to have to do something like that, especially if we're doing face-to-face, kind of work.
I mean,
although
one
Nicole's
area
suggestion of the side-by-side might be a solution to both things.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, there's that level of detail about people sit not just X feet or meters apart, but how they seat. It seemed to be directly is a problem at the moment, but I guess at least on our side, I think they're looking at new models for things like nail bars, and other things where people and hairdressers. So there may be something to learn from that. The other point that I think came out of the point from Chris is something I perceive both within our trustees, we're set up as a charity, but also amongst our repairers, is the need for engagement. So everybody's got a clear position, because we're certainly aware of a local repair cafe near us where there's been a big bust up in the coordinating team. In the part of the coordinating team wanted to run a repair cafe in a marquee, and some key players in their organizing team didn't agree with that, so they've left because they thought their perception of risk was higher than the others. So I think there's some probably stakeholder engagement type of exercise that needs to happen. At least I'm thinking on my feet, so that one doesn't open until at least 80% of people are ready. You know what I mean? It's coming to some position.
Yeah. That's so. And we're at the stage where we're we're just you know, beginning to think about that. We've run one virtual repair cafe and it went very well, but as people point out, only people who have their own tools and are comfortable can really do repairs in that environment. So we're missing a lot of people who we help at a regular, you know, an in-person one. And we're looking into now, after talking to David McCallie, you know, doing the drop-off model. And we're hoping either fall or early next year to be able to go back to the in-person. And that's when we need to get all the ducks in a row as far as, you know, the rules for how we do that.
No, absolutely. And again, you know, building on a point I made earlier that I've only just realized as I've started to think about it a bit more, is much also depends on your venue and their position. So we, although we're not religiously affiliated, we operate within a church that's a great partner for us. But they're developing their own policy that we need to adhere to, you know, because they own the venue. We, you know, we're fortunate that we have a good relationship and we don't pay for the venue, but we still need to adhere to their rules. We, of course, will need to develop our own rules for the period of time that we run any session, but it's not just the Repair Cafe organization. It's in a sense who hosts it is another issue. I've only just thought through and obviously, literally today, as I mentioned earlier, I had back that even within the larger room that we are moving to, they've done this sort of operational research exercise, and they've said there's only 15 people can be in that room. Well, we would have, 100 plus, so for us, that's a major constraint, in terms of our ability to go back. So I don't know if there's any other open comments that people want to make, or any other observations people want to make. Just I'll give it a minute or two for anybody to pose anything back to the group. But if there's nothing further, I'd like to thank everybody very much for their attendance and participation. And I think, it may be, that we think, not that we have any of the answers, but it feels as if it might be useful to facilitate at least a thinking session around what are the issues in going back, in a sort of transitionary position. So that's something we'll think about and maybe go back to the list to see if it's worthwhile organizing a session where we're facilitating and people perhaps could share their thinking and ideas, because I'm sure that would be useful to all, maybe. And it sounds like it could be useful transatlantic, onto the continent. And so watch out for an email asking the question. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Dave, for your help on the questions. Thank you very much for the speakers, for sharing your knowledge. And let's just keep sharing what we're doing, because I think, as Chris highlighted, I think we've all, in all our activities, highlighted, how well received and important, in fact, some repair cafes are to communities. So again, it's not just about repair, it's about that community and that social dimension that people value very highly as well. So I'll shut up now, leave everybody to their, dinners, to their lunches, whatever, and good night, and see you on Zoom, hopefully sometime in the future. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Thank you from Devon.